solution is simple. Redirect the resources. I mean, you have to think in terms of compassion and ask yourself, am I the type of person that allows bad things to happen by standing back and not doing anything to help?
Welcome to Radical Listening, the Portland podcast where we talk to local artists about their work. I'm your host, Phil Johnson.
And I'm your co-host, Clifton Holtznagel. Today on the show, we talk with Mikki Jordan and Chris Harder, who are involved with And From These Streets I Rise at Coho Productions in association with Street Roots Magazine. The show will be live September 11th through 13th online. You can find tickets at cohoproductions.org.
Yeah, and I gotta say, coming back to theater is a wild ride, but coming back to theater and including camera and including, live mixing and streaming to YouTube, it's a way more difficult task. And this production really does a great job. I think people are going to really enjoy this production, but I also think that they're really going to appreciate the amount of effort that this team has put into doing this. It's highly theatrical, but it's also filmed really well.
Yeah.
So,
and you've got a pretty inside look on it because you're sound designing it right now. So
right.
Yeah,
I'm working on sound and mostly for me that's just been mixing and miking and stuff like that. But it's been amazing to work with Sammy, who is the musician, and Mikki, who is the playwright, and Chris, who is the director, and their vision is just so clear and straightforward, and it shows, I think.
Yeah, and it's topical and it's wonderful, and I think it'll be good for this format from what I've seen, and I'm excited to see it.
That's true. I mean, we talk. So the play deals with the houseless community, and it's one of the reasons why I kind of compel you to come see the show or to log on and see the show online, because there's a lot of talk right now. There's a lot of things happening right now. We've got Black Lives Matter happening. We've got economic injustice, on many levels. And one of the levels that is mostly overlooked is the houseless community. And so for Mikki to bring attention to this is really noble. And for her to do the work that she does as a social worker is also very noble. And so I just want to thank her for doing that. And so, without further ado, let's just get into the interview.
Welcome to Radical Listening. My name is Clifton Holtznagel, your co-host. And today on the show, we have Chris Harder and Mikki Jordan from the project From These Streets I Rise, playing at Coho Theater September 11th through the 13th online. So,
All right, online.
Exciting. Everyone's opening their season with their first online shows. I've been hearing about some of those. So, thanks for being on the podcast. Mikki, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. It's been a very exciting month, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we're just getting out of rehearsal an hour ago here. So, and we just had a great run through. So I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm feeling good. I'm confident.
It seems like Tech Week has been getting more and more intense for theaters now. It's always a little bit like going through all the technical things, but now this added layer. How has that changed, like, the tech process?
The tech process.
Yeah,
get right into
I'm
it.
Curious, yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's tech is tech. Tech's always a little tedious, It's an exciting time because lights and sound and, I mean, in this case, cameras and sound and lights and actors. And we're filming this live in a theater with 3 cameras set up. And we just got the cameras. Oh, gosh. How long has it been? Early.
Yeah, it's been like a week, I think.
Over the weekend?
Like that, yeah.
Wow.
Nice. So we had a big tech rehearsal over the weekend. And so it was all imagined in my imagination how this might be framed up. So it's really wonderful just to see the work on the stage get framed up and come to life in a sort of a film kind of format in a way.
And Mikki, you wrote and are starring in this show. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So could you just give me your elevator pitch on this show? Like, how would you describe the show?
This goes back a couple years. So I originally conceived the show about 2-ish plus years ago. I've long been a big fan of documentary theater styles and forms, and I studied a little bit with some folks back in New York about that form. And I always knew I wanted to create my own piece one day, but I just kind of didn't know what it was. I didn't know what the story would be. I just wasn't kind of there yet mentally or artistically. I was kind of getting the itch to create something. I was talking to a close friend of mine about my idea for documentary theater. And I'm a social worker. I work in the emergency department. I work a lot with unhoused populations predominantly. And my friend worked at Street Roots, and we just thought, well, it'd be really interesting to maybe gather some of these stories from these Street Roots vendors and create a theater piece around that and just kind of see what comes up from it. So it really just kind of started not as like an intention to create a play necessarily, but just more to start experimenting with the form of just interviewing, creating that into monologues, and then presenting that and just kind of see how that manifests. So the initial one was about early last year. I did like a concert version of the piece that's very, 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 very different than what we're doing now. This is definitely more true to, I think, a more theater form. But it was a good way to experiment that early. It felt a little bit more like a workshop production. And then I had this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful opportunity with Coho, where they gave me a chance to kind of remount and revisit this piece with a whole, like an entire creative team. Before I did the whole thing by myself. So I was truly like a one-man band. And so this was such an honor to actually have like a whole team, like not just like Chris Harder and Coho, but like all these like tech folks, like everyone just helping this come to life in a live stream. It's the whole thing is just blowing my mind.
Yeah.
I'm like, how did I end up here? This is just so freaking cool, especially in the middle of a global pandemic with multiple world crises. I mean, there's just so much going on in our world right now. It just feels like an incredible, incredible honor to get to be back in a theater right now creating. And this is coming from someone who myself, I've been on hiatus from acting for well over 10 years. I haven't done any theater at all. So it's like, what a bizarre time to come back into theater and performance and art making. And I'm like, well, what better time than, numerous world crises to like get back into your creative work again. So
I think the thing that rings the most about this play is how timely it is. It felt like, a lot of people are trying to make theater right now in different forms, but you're saying that this kind of came together in this almost magical way, and it was happenstance. But the piece that you created is actually very relevant to the moment that we're in. And so I'm just curious, when you were crafting this new version and adding in all of the stuff about COVID and in quarantine and stuff, so what was that process like? Did you go back to the same monologues and to those same people and ask those people questions, or did you get new people? How did that all come about?
So I did. I went back and I re-interviewed some of the folks that I'd interviewed initially for the project. I wanted to re-interview more people, but just the reality of COVID and pandemic and it was just really hard to find folks. So I did do some re-interviews. So that's where I got some of the updated material from. And then I also went back to some of the old interviews and just kind of dug up stuff that I was like, my first, incarnation of this, I didn't really, touch on kind of police violence much. And my show doesn't go much into that. I mean, I don't hit every topic right now, but I heard some stuff in the interviews from before that kind of touched on some of that. So I was like, oh, well, that needs to go in the show now because that's particularly relevant right now. So just kind of listening to the interviews with a new ear.
Yeah. I'm curious if you have talked to any of the houseless people about the protests and how they feel about the protests that are going on in their communities. I'm just curious about that. Yeah.
I wish I could say I had, but when I did the re-interviews, the Black Lives Matter thing hadn't taken off yet. This was those protests hadn't really, it was really more about pandemic and quarantine. So when I started revisiting the piece, it was more like, let's get some pandemic oriented material in it. And then I had the idea, well, do we go back and try to I had to kind of have a stopping point at how many times I kind of revisit material with and how many topics and issues I fold into this piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
So no, I didn't have a chance to talk about that with them. But I know that they're very heavily affected by it and impact. I mean, they're living in the midst of, these conflicts right now. They don't have shelter from it. They don't have a safe place to get away from it. So, maybe that'll be another project.
Well, yeah. And it concerns me too, because I think about, like tear gas that's out in the street. It's
Exactly.
like, what happens to people who don't have a place of refuge
And-
from stuff like that?
Yeah, and I've seen the police indiscriminately shoot tear gas right into near tents and communities and stuff like that. So yeah, I can just imagine it's very hard. But I also see a lot of those people also protesting in the streets. So it's good to see.
So Chris, how did you get involved on this project? Did Mikki reach out to you, or how did you come on board?
Yeah, Mikki and I met. I guess we met in a class, right?
I took your Meisner class, yeah.
Yeah, and then from there, last year when she was working on this show, the concert version of this show, she reached out to me and asked for a little feedback on some of the monologues she was working on, the characters, and I was just super jazzed. I mean, she's so good. She just embodies these characters so well, and so I just really enjoyed working with her for a couple of a few coaching sessions,
Mhm.
and then we stayed in touch a little bit, and we were going to do a different show for Coho. We submitted a different play, a one-woman show called
On the Exhale.
On the Exhale. I wasn't sure if I was going to say it.
I love
Spill the
one-woman
beans.
shows.
Was this a secret project?
I think I imagine it's on the back burner somewhere, right? It's sort of sitting back in there. Maybe someday that'll be the right play. But it deals with gun violence, and we were actually going to do that show as the first show of the season for Coho, and then the pandemic hit, and Mikki and I talked about it, and we said, this doesn't feel like the right show to do right now.
Yeah.
And then we in conversations with Philip, I think Mikki had submitted her demo reel from last year of this show to Philip at Coho Productions, and that sort of stirred the pot on this conversation around this show and bringing it back to life.
Wow. Okay.
So
That's interesting.
yeah.
And hey, gun violence is back in the center, so you've got another show for when this one's done. You got to get
Yeah,
working.
There will be a gun show at some point, I would
Yeah.
imagine. Something
Chris already
about
looks stressed out.
I got to keep going. No, yeah.
So what is it like? I mean, in a way, we're all pioneers in this moment. What is it like to bring theater back to life in this way? Using live streaming, using cameras. And this is a question for both of you. We're all kind of seizing upon this moment of wanting to reinvent theater, wanting to or to keep it going, and so we're all making these adjustments, we're all making compromises. And so what does that feel like in your creative process?
That's a big question. I think Chris and I are coming at this from such different angles. Like
Yeah.
I said, for me, I've been out of the acting profession for over 10 years. So not only am I just coming back to kind of creating and performing my own work, now I'm also folding in cameras. I've never done any camera work.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about tech and rehearsals, like now I'm having to wear this whole new hat of, it's not like the regular blocking I'm used to with theater blocking. You have to really stand in these specific points. And that's, one thing when you're shooting a film where you can kind of keep reshooting a scene, but I'm trying to get from beginning to end in my whole show and hit all those exact points. So it's just a lot of different hats I'm having to kind of hold and wear. At times it's really overwhelming. A lot of this feels very new to me. And other times it feels incredibly exciting to just be kind of like jumping off the ledge, being like, I'm trying something I've never done before in so many ways. And it feels invigorating. And then the other piece of that for me is I think especially with these stories that I think are so important, that we get the opportunity to open this up to a wider audience, that I get to invite people from all over the country to watch this and see this, to share in this, to donate money to Street Roots, to donate money to Coho. Like that's, we miss live audience. I can't wait for like live theater to happen again. I'm hungry for it. But there's a part of me that's really excited to, let's see what we can do with this opportunity, because there's something here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, like it feels like a theater piece. It's where there's really no set. We're in a black box and it's simple. There's a big black curtain. There's a 3-camera setup, but Jennifer Lynn is doing the lights. She's designed the lights, and they're so beautiful. I mean, like I could just sit in the audience and watch the show, and it feels it's so cool just to see a live theater piece and be in the theater. So we're not hiding the seats. We're finding really interesting ways to frame it up and in this space, and I'm excited. I mean, I'm really excited to work on camera. I mean, I feel like I've been working on camera more recently because of this COVID sort of lockdown, and it's sort of forcing me and us, I think, to be creative and innovative. And I feel like we're bringing a theater piece to the screen, and in a really unique way. And I love that it's going to be a live stream. So yeah, I mean,
what does it feel like to be a film director?
I love it. I mean, I love the composition aspect of it, like really like crafting, finding the right frame and the move of the camera that is motivated in some way or adds to the narrative. It's really exciting. I feel like I'm learning so much, and time has been a little crunched to figure some of these compositions out and sort of move into the film aspect of this piece. But it's really, I'm just impressed. We've taken a lot of risks. We've sort of like we could have just sort of settled in a long time ago on this is going to be the thing, and we keep pushing for something more dynamic and more exciting and more specific and clear and theatrical. So I love it.
Great. I had some questions about the music, because you talked about how this was a more of a concert piece at some point, and the piece, the video I've seen of the piece so far, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Sammy playing the guitar and singing, and I'm just curious about, and maybe the banjo at one point. I was watching like a cell phone video of a rehearsal, so I couldn't hear as well, but yeah, I'm just curious about how this was, because the format is, monologues and music interspersed and, characters, and I'm just curious of what the concert version was like, and where the songs came from, and what the inspiration was with the music.
Yeah, so when I first created the piece, before I was doing interviews or anything like that, I was working with the pianist Jonathan Eder, who was part of that initial concert, and just singing. I just, working on jazz, blues, lots of old time music is what I'm drawn to. And so I noticed that a lot of the themes in the old time music I was drawn to was, kind of Depression era, blues, down and out songs. So two light bulbs went off at the same time. I was like, wow, these songs would just go really well with the stories that I'm collecting. And then the idea for kind of creating more of a concert as opposed to a more kind of traditional kind of Anna Devere Smith kind of style documentary show. I just had this idea of kind of this concert idea, because it just suited things I enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
I thought they would complement each other well. So that was that. And I was happy with the way that turned out. When I partnered with Chris, when we started thinking about music, I really wanted this version to be less of a concert. I wanted it to have more of a little bit of a kind of around the campfire feel. So we're kind of gathered around the campfire, sharing stories. At that time, I wasn't fully aware that the pandemic would be as bad as it was, and that we wouldn't actually be able to do that in a theater, Yeah. But Chris introduced me to Sammy Jo Pfeiffer, who's, as soon as I heard her music, I was just like, I was almost in tears. It's just her music is so freaking beautiful. Yeah. And just the soulfulness and the heart of her music, it's my show. I was like, well, this has to be in the show. And as soon as I heard her voice, I also felt like I don't even want to sing as much. Because last time I sang all the songs. I sang all the songs. I did all the monologues. It was kind of exhausting, frankly. Sure. And I was like, how great to have a partner on stage that can kind of help me kind of carry this music. And I don't have to juggle all these balls. Once Sammy got involved in the show, we realized, well, obviously Chris probably already knew, but she's so talented. I was like, well, she's not like an accompanist. It's like, we're not going to have her just up there just playing the guitar in the background. Like, she has a presence. There's a character that started to form from her. So the show became completely different than what it was before. So now we have this relationship between Sammy, who I kind of identify as the muse of the show, who's kind of guiding me, my character, the woman, to kind of be moving through all these characters, these stories. So that was a big collaborative piece. Chris was a huge hand in, I think, helping us figure out the importance of that voice and that partnership, and trying to get more specific with what that relationship is between this character and the musician.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna add this little piece that Sammy wrote original music for this show. After she read the script, she came back with all these songs, right?
That's so cool.
I was gonna ask how that process came about, because there is a lot of original music.
Yeah, so it's a nice mashup. So she had some old pieces of hers that just totally fit in the show. When you hear them, you're like, well, of course this isn't from These Streets I Rise. They're very soulful. You feel like you're listening to stories about, folks on the streets, even though that's not what she wrote about. There's just that heart to them. Then she wrote some original pieces based specifically on the monologues that inspired her. And then we also interspersed that with just some really traditional folk songs of just kind of unknown origin. So it's not all written by her, but I'd say probably at least 75% of the songs are written by her. Many of those are original songs.
Yeah, I got to work with her on a show a few years ago, Caucasian Chalk Circle, where we were making a lot of the music throughout it. And it was, wonderful actress, guitar player, and other artistic. She's a wonderful human, and it was really fun creating music with her. So I'm glad to know that there's a lot of her original music in there. That's great.
Yeah, and she has a little album on, not a little album, but an album on Bandcamp that's just the music from the show that she's written. So
wow,
I hope
to drop a link.
Well, go check it out on Bandcamp and download her album. It's really awesome. You can listen to the, our tracks.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I'm curious why you left acting. What was did you just feel like you needed to step away, or what was your relationship to acting before?
I'm like, all right, now we're getting into it. All right, I'm going to roll my sleeves up. That's always a difficult question for me to answer, because it's not one reason. I graduated from NYU around 2002. I was, in New York City when 9/11 happened. I remember at that time just really questioning myself, my role as an artist at that time. It really obviously shook all of us up. But and so from there, well into my late 20s, I pursued acting in New York. I, did the best I could, but it was just kind of running that mill of just doing a lot of work that wasn't meaningful, trying to make ends meet, trying to get that agent, trying to get the next gig while you're juggling 4 day jobs. And I just got to the point I was just super burnt out, and I just felt like I wasn't really contributing anything very meaningful in the world. And I felt like I had more to give than kind of the rat race I was in. I started doing some volunteer work. I'd had some relationships with social workers in the past. I'd found some of the work really inspiring. I did a lot of work with rape and domestic violence survivors in hospitals. And I was just like, man, it's interesting. So I started to see that a lot of my acting skills really carried over into social work and mental health work. The idea of being present and kind of walking in a room with another human being and just kind of being ready for whatever's in front of you, and that ability to kind of be present and kind of roll with people in difficult situations. I noticed that I was drawn to that, and I already kind of had a skill for that just as an actor. And so, I went back to school for social work, moved to Portland, and really missed acting.
Yeah.
Well, this is a really interesting full circle moment for you then, because you're portraying yourself as the social worker on stage, which is, there's so many layers to that. I can't even go into.
That's a new element in the show. So before, we didn't kind of have that outside view. I mean, like I said, it was just a concert. I don't know if this was Chris' idea or my idea. I think we might have done this together. It might have been more Chris's idea to bring I think it was more Chris's idea to bring the social worker kind of voice into this rendition of the piece as a way to kind of tie in better kind of my perspective and even creating this, But yeah, I think when I changed careers into social work, it wasn't ever with the intention to completely leave the arts. It was always with the hope of coming back and kind of reuniting my kind of social work profession back with the arts. I was really into, I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary, Shakespeare Behind Bars. Awesome documentary just about doing Shakespeare in prisons. So I was really moved by that type of work, and I wanted to kind of find my way into that. Of course, once I went into social work, I realized, none of that work actually pays. So it's not really the most reasonable career. So just trying to, once again, as a social worker and an artist, figure out, well, how do I sustain myself and do, work that's meaningful? And this project is certainly like my big foray into that world. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Chris, I've always wanted to ask you this, and so since you're on the show, I feel like it's time. I'm curious how you got your start in the acting business. Was it a high school thing, a college
school play at church as a kid?
Yeah. I wasn't expecting that.
I moved. What's that?
I said I wasn't expecting that.
I went to school in Wisconsin and University of Wisconsin Parkside, small liberal arts college, and with a great theater program. And then after I graduated, I moved to Portland, and I had never been west of the Mississippi, so I just moved out here, and that was '96.
Oh yeah.
And I got connected with my first show was with Stark Raving Theater. And that was before Stark Raving Theater was in the Coho space. They were over on, they had two spaces on Belmont, where the theater building used to be. And then they had the second space is where Defunct is right now, which is that little backdoor theater behind Common Grounds Coffee House. And so my first show was at the backdoor theater. With Stark Raving, and then I got involved with Barry Hunt, got connected to him and Lorraine Barr, and Sewelu Theater Company began in '98, and I was an ensemble member of that company for 7 seasons, and I feel like that was my grad school. Working with Barry and Lorraine and the Sewelu Ensemble, we trained in Meisner and Viewpoints, and we would meet every Saturday and do just a Saturday workshop. It was like a little acting gym where we would just train together and work out. Even when we were working on shows, the Saturday workshops were like a separate sort of workout date. And then I was just in Portland for a while, and so I started freelancing at that point and kind of just working around town and meeting people. And I've always loved Portland. I love the mountains and the ocean, and I like to fly fish. So
there you go.
It feels like a good place for me to be.
Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you at any point tell me that you ever were a stage hypnotist?
Yeah. So, I worked for this event. I still have that skill.
Oh, really?
It doesn't go away.
It's happening to us.
Is that what that is? So, okay, tell me more about that. How did you get into that? Like, how?
Well, I was a clown. I mean, I started, I've always been fascinated with clowning, and I was like, what is an aspect of training that I don't have? I never went to school like Del Arte. I was meeting a lot of Del Arte folks, and I was like, I want some of that clown training. And I was a birthday party clown in my 20s and 30s. I was like doing kids parties, and I created a little solo show. I was doing comedy magic and making kids laugh. And if kids don't laugh, you're not funny.
True.
So I was like cutting my teeth, learning these new skills with like audience interaction, like how do I report to the audience and like check in with them and just vibe off that audience in that kind of way. And I was teaching kids, and so that was just fun. It was just a lot of fun years. Well, that events company had, they were doing a lot of different kinds of events. So they were like my agent, and they do a lot of high school graduation parties. And these parties are like, the kids, like the PTA will put together a big party at the end of the summer or at the end of the school year. And it'll be like an overnight event. And so I went to Las Vegas and I trained, got trained.
Where do you train for something like this?
What's that?
So there's just a school in Vegas.
School of Hypnotism?
Yeah, there's schools all over. I mean,
sure.
it's there's a mentor,
Yeah.
a stage hypnotist who's like traveled the world and
Yeah.
has these skills, and then he starts teaching. And so I went and I trained with him and Jeff Ronning, and came back and put together a show, a solo show, a stage hip show. And I started booking these graduation parties through this events company. So I had a 1-hour show, and really it's about relaxing people, getting people in a suggestible state. Everyone's a volunteer. I can't just hypnotize somebody on the spot, but it's just fun to like bring people up, get them, help them relax, and then let go of their inhibitions, and then I talk them through an improv show. Really, that's
Do you
that's the way.
Do you still use this skill for anything?
I feel like that propelled me into creating my own one-man shows that Coho Theater supported back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, the skills are like, I think the relaxation and like the body work and just like self-talk, like self-hypnosis in a way. Like just connecting with my mind and being aware of where I am right now, and it's a stressful time, so those kinds of things I think help just kind of finding my center, grounding myself, and that sort of thing.
I wonder if being a hypnotist is kind of like being a magician in that you can't really reveal too much about how it actually works.
It's so simple, man. I mean, really, you could hypnotise anyone.
Could you hypnotize through a screen?
This is
maybe. Question that we all want to know.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's really just about helping someone relax and get to that place.
Try that with me before our rehearsals. I could use some of that, Chris.
You're doing great.
Yeah. Maybe he's already used it and you just didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, just like slide these little suggestions in.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, this seems like a good time to take a break. We're going to take a break and we'll come back with headline. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second to talk about our show sponsors. Coho is a theater that's located in Northwest Portland, and their mission is to broaden perspectives and cultivate empathy through vibrant and intimate productions. If you're looking to get involved with Coho or interested in seeing a show, you can check them out at 2257 Northwest Raleigh Street in Portland, Oregon, or you can look at their website, which is cohoproductions.org. Our other show sponsor is virtualsonicreality.com, which is a production company that specializes in recording and audio format entertainment, such as podcasts and audio dramas. Feel free to visit the website at virtualsonicreality.com. And now back to the show. Now it's time for headlines.
Everybody's favorite segment of the show.
Yes.
Headlines.
So this is the point in the show where we bring up topics from the news and we get your take on them. So I'm going to start with one that I saw yesterday that caught my eye, and I think it has a lot to do with what's going on right now in Portland. So this headline reads, "An explosive device used at a gender reveal party caused fire and mass evacuations in California."
What?
Yeah.
So someone's gender reveal party went terribly wrong.
Well, it went right. They had an explosive device that like sprayed a bunch of whatever colored smoke is supposed to be associated with that baby's genitals, and they exploded it in the middle of like a grass field.
Yeah.
And then it all caught on fire, and now that was like one of the igniting
people are
points of
fleeing
like
for their
big
lives.
forest fire right now. So, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. So I guess the question is, how do you feel about gender reveal parties? And how do you
this
feel?
This is like, I wasn't sure what you meant at first. So this is the thing where like if you have a baby, then you bring your baby and you invite friends, and then you don't tell them ahead of time like what the sex is.
Well, usually I think the way it works is that the mother knows, but the father doesn't know. And so it's like a
It's like
party.
they find out beforehand, from an ultrasound.
I had a
It's
friend.
kind of like a baby shower.
Yeah, it's like a baby shower, where the father finds out the sex of the baby.
Okay.
I didn't realize that's what a gender reveal party was.
Yeah.
That's just more general. That sounds terrible.
I think they should have had a birthday party clown and a pinata.
Hey, there you go.
Pinata is a way
Get
better
some
idea.
work. Yeah. Make some work for us performers.
Yeah, my thing is that people who have gender reveal parties also have baby showers. So it just, to me, feels a little redundant.
It's part of like the wedding industrial complex kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Way to get more gifts. Yeah.
Now, here's the thing is, regardless how you feel about having a gender reveal party, the fact that they burned down half of California has got to be, I don't know. I feel like, and now we have this, smoke over Portland. So when I saw this headline, I was wondering if that had anything to do with what's going on here.
So we've got our own fires right now. Oh my gosh. I was terrified last night with all that wind.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Did you guys experience any of that? Any of the rolling blackouts or anything like that?
No. Half my neighborhood blacked out, but I was in the safe zone. But yeah, we had a bunch of big trees fall and, topple down some power lines and stuff. Just happy people are safe. That stuff's kind of scary,
Yeah.
Yeah, I only know a couple people who lost power, but it seems like a lot of people were affected. So
yeah.
Yeah, we lost power.
Oh, you lost power?
Yeah, and it was really smoky.
So smoky.
And the wind was kicking.
Oh
I mean,
my
the
gosh.
wind was blowing really hard, and the smoke was like, our house is like these old single pane windows, so felt like it was getting in through all those little cracks.
Yeah.
So it got into the house.
Yeah, a little bit. But we just like lit some candles and hung out. We talked, and no TV, no internet. Like, didn't want to use our phones too much because the batteries would die.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you guys were prepared for this. Are you an outdoorsy type of person? Do you have like camping gear and stuff like that?
Fly fisherman, he said.
I do, yeah. And we have a gas grill outside that we could fire up if need be, but we don't have a generator or anything like that. I suppose we could charge our phones on our car.
Oh,
We
okay.
could go up and fire up the car if we needed to
Car's
do
the
that.
generator.
But,
Yeah.
Okay, my headline, it was, and I don't have the exact headline here anymore.
Get it together.
It was basically someone had posted a picture and said, like, this is an Antifa war camp in Portland, and it was a picture of the houseless community they had set up by the I-5 and 84 interchange, where they had, I think during COVID, they brought out like the pallets and stuff to try to help people have some space. So that was the thing that someone posted, and just seemed very misinformed. And I was just, curious how you feel about that, but also like how often it seems that homeless people are viewed as violent, and how much of an issue that is in the community.
Well, that's kind of what my show's about.
Yeah.
I think they're often painted in a very ill light. I can't speak to that headline totally, because my mind is still kind of reeling from trying to imagine that image with that headline. It's very a little disturbing. But yeah, I think what my show speaks to, not my show, but the folks that I spoke with, most of them really, talked about how, misrepresented they feel, whether it's that they're violent or they're all addicted to drugs, they're all strung out on meth, they just don't want to work, that they're causing all this kind of destruction in the community, all this, the dirt and the needles everywhere and the poor hygiene. It's very offensive to a lot of them, because a lot of them, from the stories that I've heard, the reality is they don't have access to, hygiene facilities. They don't have access to, just basic resources to help them, kind of get by day to day. And a lot of them don't have drug problems. That's not why they're on their streets at all. But yeah, it's so easy to pigeonhole people and their experiences. Just like we're seeing in the news, whatever news headline you bring up, it's like, oh, it's just another way we can kind of keep pigeonholing and keep just really narrowing these stories down until there's just no human element to them at all. The dehumanizing of each other overall, no matter what subject matter we bring up, I think is one of the most upsetting things I see happening in the world right now. No matter what side you're on, where you are, it's just like, oh my gosh, everything is much more complicated than any of these media headlines or articles are really allowing space for right now. And I think that's where theater can come in.
Yeah,
The
hopefully.
gray area.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been noticing that too, especially in like the mainstream media. There's this need to control, everyone's trying to control the narrative from their point of view, and especially with the way that the right is framing things. It's this demonization and just like removal of humanity, especially of houseless people, and it's sickening to see because Trump wants to go around and say clean up your cities and all this kind of stuff, but he has no idea what caused all this. And I talk to houseless people as well, and I'm always surprised to hear their stories about how like a lot of them have traveled here, and they were really they're like refugees, right? Like they were trying to find a place that had a little bit more to offer people like them, and so that here they end up on the West Coast, and there's more resources, there's surplus here, there's a lot of help here. But from the media perspective, it just looks like, there's this congregation of, people. They're, deplorables or whatever. And
they're always like, how do we clean up the streets? It's like, maybe fix the problems,
Yeah. It's much bigger than just providing hygiene facilities, which we need more of. But that's not doing anything to solve the root problem.
Right.
Of why folks are on the street to begin with.
But I feel like you're the perfect person to ask this question. So what do you think needs to be done? What, from your perspective, how do we help these people for real?
That is such a complicated, that's just so complicated. But let me start with the things that I know and that I've observed. And then there's so much more to unpack beyond that. Yeah. I think from working in the emergency department as a social worker, what I see on the front lines of that is because we get so many unhoused folks who come into the ER just trying to get kind of basic needs met, basic resources met. It's everything from lack of access to adequate mental health care. Our mental health care system is one of the worst ranked in the country for access to care. So there's that, a lot of mental health issues and challenges, lack of access to substance use treatment for those who are struggling with addiction, which is just all around us. Not to stigmatize people on the streets is that they're all addicts, but there's a lot of addiction on the streets and they're not able to really access, I think, true treatment. And the treatment we have available for them is often subpar and just very limited. So those are certainly some things from a social worker perspective that the challenges I have in connecting folks. And then I think from some of the stories I heard, I think there's also a lack of understanding, even probably on my part, to really comprehend what it's like to live on the streets for a long time and the challenges of actually becoming housed, that a lot of them actually found getting in housing for the first time to also be traumatic for them, which might be hard for us to understand. But I think it's the idea that we need to be a little bit more sympathetic and empathetic to kind of complex lived experiences. And maybe not everyone can be sustained in like a proper apartment with, a subsidized apartment. Maybe some people do need a tent because that's where they're more comfortable. Maybe we need to have more flexible kind of living options for humans. That not everyone is comfortable kind of like living in a box in suburbia or in an apartment downtown where the only apartment affordable to them, they're surrounded by, drug addiction and violence and aggression, and they already have PTSD and it's too traumatizing. They're like, I'm more comfortable on the streets. I'm not staying here. So it's lots of those. And then the housing is a whole other issue, just access to affordable housing. So I could go on.
No, thank you very much. I feel like that gives us enough to, first of all, give these people a little bit more humanity and but also it helps us to think about the types of social change that we need to fight for. And I mean, a lot of people seem to be like-minded on these topics, but we still have a lot of work to do. Yeah.
And it's just so, I mean, not to harp on it, but like the fact that there's so many empty new apartments around is just a crime. And I work in installing TVs in people's homes, and a lot of them are like new homes, and they're just building these new homes out in the suburbs still, even though, I don't know, it's just, there's just such a disconnect between housing and the people who own the housing, and the way that real estate gets looked at as like a token of value rather than a place where people are living, So, yeah.
How do you attach all these weird things to unhoused, like lower income folks? Like a lot of them have these like rules that you have to maintain your sobriety in order to maintain your housing. Like,
How is that going to help, right?
do that.
Yeah.
Like, why are we such jerks to them? I mean,
Yeah.
you're struggling with PTSD, you're struggling with complex mental health issues, like all sorts of things. We're like, and you can't have any marijuana or you're out. Like,
Wow.
I don't know. I think we need to like loosen up a little bit.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
Yeah.
All right, last headline. Okay. Facebook will pay users to log off before the 2020 election.
What?
Yep. So it says that Facebook is offering users money to refrain from using the site and Instagram in the weeks leading up to the November election.
Just to...
Yeah, just to get off of Facebook.
Wow.
What do you think about that?
I don't understand it. Is that true? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think so.
like,
I read into this a little bit more, and it seems like they're paying people around like $140 or something like
I
a
haven't been on
stipend.
Facebook in 3 months. I'll get off.
Why? I mean,
so
I don't
that
want to be
people
on
don't
social
argue
media.
with their aunt, on.
Right.
Wow. Because they're worried about the polarity. I know they've been taking a lot of heat for, stoking, because people get in their bubbles and everything, and there's a lot of fake news, and it led to recently it shut down some conservative sites, and then a lot of like anarchist and left-wing sites too, because they were just getting rid of bias, and so I feel like I can't believe they're going to pay people money to log off.
Well, they also got in trouble in 2016 because Facebook was known to be one of the assets that Russians used
to
influence the election. So maybe they're just trying to cover their own, I don't know.
Their own what.
That just
Kind
sounds
of, depending on the election goes one way, so they can at least say it wasn't because of Facebook and the Russians.
Right.
Wow.
I don't know what exactly Mark Zuckerberg is thinking.
Really?
The question is, are you guys going to get off of Facebook and collect your $150?
Well, see, I was going to get off Facebook. I didn't know I could collect. So might as well collect now.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm disappointed now. I've been off Facebook for 3 years.
You got to get back on and then get off again.
Yeah, I had to stop
I had to join now.
I had to stop during COVID at the beginning because I was just like getting caught too in it, and then I was just interacting with the internet in a different way than I had before. And took a break. But Instagram is still
you're still on that.
Still my addiction. So I don't know if you have to do that too. 140 or Instagram? I don't know, man. I don't know.
What about Twitter? Are they going to pay you?
Twitter is not paying you.
There's nothing incendiary on Twitter. Don't worry.
Twitter's just
There's no
facts.
influence there.
Yeah.
It's just all facts. At least it's all framed as opinion, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'm not on there. But...
Great. All right. Well, let's do plugs. All right. So this is the point in the show where you can plug anything to our audience, our huge subscriber base, and
tens of
anything you want them to know. It can be books, it can be a play you want them to see, anything like that. So
I will replug Sammy Jo Pfeiffer and her music. Please go to Bandcamp because her music's amazing. She has several albums up there. Her work is just so beautiful. And then I guess I was just thinking about recently, I'm with my being a fan of documentary theater, Eric Jensen and Jessica Blank, they've created numerous documentary shows in New York City, several this year, but one they created during the pandemic that's called The Line, and it's available via live stream via the Public Theater. And I was just been really fascinated. They did interviews with a lot of the frontline emergency workers in New York City when things were kind of really at its worst. So just kind of a collection of those experiences of being on the front line of the pandemic. And once again, how theater and storytelling can kind of offer us a little bit of a distance from some tragic events, but give us kind of a new diverse perspective, a new way to kind of listen to the world around us that the media certainly can't offer us right now. But I think sometimes theater and storytelling can. Mm-hmm. So it's called The Line. I would check it out.
Nice.
Yeah, I should plug Coho Productions. Coho is the theater that we're partnered up with, co-producing this show, Street Roots, of course. I mean, I thought about this. I'm like, there are so many companies and theater companies in town right now that are being really creative and innovative right now. I know Portland Center Stage, Arts Repertory Theater, Third Rail, Hand to Mouth, Pete, Many Hats, Portland Playhouse. All of these theater companies I know are stirring the pot right now, shaking the tree, and coming up with really unique, creative ways to either record audio versions of new plays or classic plays. Zoom theater is happening.
Yeah.
Parking lot theater was that like Risk Reward did like a drive-in, like you sit in your car and see a live performance in front of you. So I just want to keep encouraging people to keep loving the arts, keep loving our local theater companies, and support our artists in that way. We're determined to create. We feel like we're all compelled to, it's like we have to do it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, check some stuff out.
Yes. Great. I'm going to go ahead and plug Going Viral, which is a YouTube video produced by Desert Island Studios, starring Ashley Mellinger and Samson Siharath.
Nice.
I just saw that the other day, and it's, without saying too much, it's kind of about being in quarantine, and I totally identified. I was just like, wow, this is such a good
Going viral.
yeah. It's such a good representation of being stir crazy, I guess, for sure, and just also what it's like to be in quarantine. It's almost like a document. So definitely check that out on YouTube.
And I have been starting to get involved with a friend's production. Well, it's just starting now with a bunch of people from the Portland protest community. And this artist, Jordan Shea, who's really great performance artist in town. And she just built a puppet theater, and they're going to do the anti-racist abolitionist puppet show. And it's going to come to the streets near you, specifically, hopefully, like outside where people are eating in front of restaurants in really crowded places. And it's going to be really renegade, and the people involved are like really, really cool, very... I was going to say ballsy, but, just very brave people. So I imagine it will stir some things up. And so keep your eye out for that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great. I just want to thank you guys so much for coming on the show today and talking to us about all of this stuff that we talked about today. And I really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Radical Listening. If you have questions or would like to reach out, feel free to reach out to our email, which is radicallisteningpodcast@gmail.com, or visit the Coho Theater website for more information. And thanks for listening.